Every Sunday, Angelique Mukabukisi thanks God for her deliverance. She hasn't much else to thank him for. Her parents are dead, her husband is dead, her 2 young children are dead.
$4,000
4,000 people once worshipped every Sunday in Nyamata. Of course, the village had a church in those days. It still does, but the living don't use it anymore. One day in April last year, Angelique and thousands of others fled there for sanctuary. There they were found by the Interahamwe, those who attack together. And there, together, they died.
noneho abinjiriye hano batangiye gutema no kujya bakubita abantu nta mpongano twebwe hari imbere kuri aritari haza umugabo arahagarara ati stop musigeho mwikwikora mu nda umuhutu kazi nazamukemo ubwo bamaze gushiramo rero nibwo batangiye kuza kutwica umwana wanjye uw'imfura muramukazi wanjye yaramuhetse bamutikuye igicumu hano byo nararebaga ahita arerembura mu mugongo arurutsa ashyira hasi umutoya nawe bamukereye ijosi hano bamukereye ari mu mugongo wanjye.
There have been massacres in plenty in the tortured history of Rwanda. But this was something different. This was genocide, planned and deliberate, authorized from the top, widespread, ruthless and barbaric. For nearly a year, investigators from the UN High Commission on Human Rights have been counting the bones, measuring the graves, interrogating the survivors.
Ultimately, what we want to do is document the genocide completely. We're talking about what could easily be 1 million people, and we're talking about 4 months. And you don't have gas chambers, do you? You don't have trains to drive those guys in there. You got people going out with handheld weapons, the majority, and killing with their biceps, if you like. So it's an amazing thing that happened here, and for us it's very important that it's very, very well understood.
It's now over a year since the people in this church and hundreds of thousands of others were butchered. It's known how and where and when they died. Many of the perpetrators have been named. And yet, so far, not one single person inside Rwanda or out has been tried and sentenced for any of these crimes. The dead, perhaps, are past caring, but for the living, the issue of justice, of legal retribution, is crucial. Wounded minds take longer to heal than wounded bodies. Many of the children at the Samaritans' orphanage near Kigali saw their parents hacked to death before their eyes.
Yes, we can recognize when children have amputations, when they've stepped on a landmine. And yes, we can see when a child is starving or an epidemic occurs in a camp. But we can't see the wounds, the intrapsychic wounds, the scars of trauma, unless we stay for a while and look closer beyond the surface of the children who appear happy and playing.
In truth, says psychologist Leela Gupta, it's not just the children, but a whole population which is traumatized by grief and shock.
The major solution that I would see that's so closely tied into adjusting and working through and coming to terms with this kind of grief is the justice system, is the sense of retribution, a sense of accountability for the perpetrators of the genocide and the violence.
This is the prison at Gitarama, an hour's drive west of the capital, Kigali. It was built to house 1,300 prisoners, in conditions which most Western countries would regard as intolerable. Today, it's holding 8,000. Many of these people have been here for 8 months. The crushed ears and festering feet were the result, the prisoners claimed, of beatings by the guards. The Red Cross ensures a supply of food and fresh water. As a result, the death rate has declined from 15 to 5 a day. But there's still no room to lie down.
Où est-ce que c'est possible à dormir ici? Vraiment, c'est un problème pour trouver où passer la nuit. Parce que les gens, certains gens passent la nuit debout. D'autres, ils prennent la position assise comme ce que vous voyez ici. Et il y en a qui sont parvenus à trouver des places dans ces bâtiments-ci. Mais eux aussi, ils sont concentrés, ils sont entassés dans un même coin.
The seething prison courtyard was bad enough. Inside, it was worse.
It's almost impossible to convey what it's like down here. The camera doesn't show smell, the camera doesn't show heat. There are, I don't know, maybe 500 people in this little tiny room. Over there are lavatories, perhaps 2 of them, and I'm told there's 2 more upstairs. That's for 8,000 people. There's coughing, there's sickness, there's people with their feet festering. It's the most extraordinary scene I've ever seen in my life, and I hope I never see anything like it again.
Wherever we went in the prison, there was rank filth, fetid air, and listless men packed cheek by jowl. In only one place was there some room to breathe, the room set aside for prisoners under 16 years old. Over 100 of them, some as young as 10. Faced with the sheer impossibility of cramming more men into the prisons, the government has stopped arresting people, at least for now.
On a été surpris. Nous n'avions pas prévu le génocide. Mais si bien que pour le moment, nous avons plus de 33 000 détenus en prison. Et je dois vous dire qu'on en aura plus. On en aura plus vu que le génocide a été opéré systématiquement et massivement. Donc, les arrestations aussi, je ne peux pas craindre qu'elles soient massives. Le problème que nous devons surmonter, c'est d'héberger ces gens, de les entretenir, de les nourrir et de les faire juger en vie.
Their problem is, how are they going to actually try all of those people? If the infrastructure in this country, the judicial infrastructure, is completely wiped out. 80% of the personnel, that is judges, defense counsel, prosecutors, are either dead outside of the country or in prison or accused of having taken part in the genocide.
In the only functioning courtroom in Kigali, 4 of the capital's 5 remaining judges are hearing a civil case, a dispute over land. There have been no criminal cases for months. Even if lawyers and judges could be found, there are no police investigators to question witnesses and prepare the evidence. What's needed, desperately, is money and skilled help. All that's arrived so far are promises. But even if the Rwandan courts were functioning, they could not try the men who planned and organized the genocide. All have escaped abroad. That job is supposed to be done by a United Nations tribunal, set up to prosecute crimes against humanity in Rwanda. But the International Tribunal has been making no unseemly haste. It too has been starved of funds. So far, it's done almost nothing at all.
The United Nations has a funding problem which has been well aired and well exposed, and it really just can't commit itself to spend money which it doesn't have.
But just across Rwanda's borders, in the sprawling refugee camps in Zaire and Tanzania, money, food, and international charity has been pouring in for a year. the biggest camps of all around Goma in Zaire. Hundreds of thousands of Hutus fled here last year to escape from the victorious army of the Tutsi-dominated Rwandan Patriotic Front. At Magunga camp last July, the roads were lined with the corpses of cholera victims. Now there are permanent water supplies, restaurants, video cinemas. A thriving semi-permanent city of 200,000, housed in blue plastic, courtesy of the UN High Commission for Refugees. Tuesday is ration day for Cyprien Ruhakama. For the UNHCR, he's a refugee whose wife and children must be fed. But to the government in Kigali, these camps are still providing food and shelter for thousands of perpetrators of the genocide, and a base from which its enemies can plan a reinvasion of Rwanda. In recent weeks, it has barred all food convoys from crossing Rwanda to Zaire. As a result, the ration, which Cyprien's wife Marie now has to try to stretch over a whole week, is barely half as much as the family really needs. The government in Rwanda says the solution is simple. The refugees should come home. Those who took no part in the genocide, they say, have nothing to fear. Cyprien Ruhakama doesn't believe a word of it.
Twe ibyo batubwira ni ibintu by'ibinyoma n'abajeho ntibaboneka akenshi abantu barashize kandi abatangiye intambara nibo bategeka bica twagiye guhunga ari buduhunga murumva ko tutagenda ngo tubisukire azitwe baje batsemba.
It's a point of view which dominates the camps. The present leaders of refugee opinion, people like camp president Augustin Harindintwari, claim they have no connection with the former government and army. They say the government in Kigali should negotiate with them for the safe return of the refugees. But the government regards many of these men as responsible for the genocide. And they, in a startling revision of history, regard the government in the same light. The massacre of Tutsis, they claim, is a manufactured myth.
Quand vous êtes attaqué, et que vous êtes menacé, vous avez le droit de vous défendre. Vous avez le droit de vous défendre. Quand vous vous défendez, quelquefois il y a... Je ne peux pas nier qu'il n'y a pas eu quand même de théorie.
But the High Commission for Human Rights, for example, has actually documented these crimes. It's been to the churches where hundreds of women and children were butchered. This was not a matter of self-defense.
Mais de toutes les façons, il faut voir. Quand le FPR avançait à l'intérieur du pays, beaucoup de gens fouillaient vers les églises. Et le FPR les trouvait là et il massacrait ces gens. Ce que vous avez vu, c'est le FPR qui a fait ça.
Real-life man portrayed as a hero in the film Hotel Rwanda went on trial today in Kigali. Paul Mugabe is credited with saving the lives of more than 1,200 people during the 1994 Rwandan Genocide. He later left the country and became a vocal critic of President Paul Kagame. He was mysteriously brought back to Rwanda and arrested on terrorism charges 6 months ago. Richard Quest was just in Rwanda. He joins us live now from New York. So, Richard, you actually talked to President Paul Kagame just last week. He said that there was no foul play in the way that Paul Rusesabagina was brought back to the country. Obviously, a lot of international human rights organizations beg to differ there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the man thought he was getting on a plane going to one place, and he was then shackled and tied up and taken to Rwanda, if the story is as it's believed to be, where he was then wanted for terrorist activity that the president says Rusesabagina was involved in. The problem for President Kagame is that this incident is tarnishing his reputation because because until now he had been seen very much as by the international community as the man who'd held Rwanda together, who'd brought Rwanda forward after the 1994 genocide. Now with this trial underway, in the manner under which it's been taken, that could all be looked upon very differently. I spoke to President Kagame in Kigali last week. This is what he said.
It was very proper and legal. In fact, he more or less brought himself. You see, whether he was acting on wrong signals, but he went by those signals to continue the journey of doing the wrong things he had been doing in the past. So
He got on a plane intending to go to one destination.
Do you know which one that is?
Was bound and gagged and brought to this destination.
Do you know which destination?
Tell me.
Yeah, he was going to Burundi.
Exactly.
He wasn't going to Dubai, as some of the people have said. Dubai was just a transit, like Chicago was a transit. He came all the way from the United States.
But he didn't expect to end up in Kigali.
Well, I don't mind what he expected. If he expected to go to Burundi to connect with the people he has been working with or leading into the stabilization of our country, what sympathies do I owe him or anybody?
Did the government of Rwanda have a hand in bringing him to Kigali? Was the government responsible for renditioning him to Kigali?
No. Bringing him or guiding him to come to Kigali and rendition or means like that seem to be illegal are totally different things. Absolutely. Now, if for him he was working with somebody in Burundi, right, in the same plot of destabilizing our country, and the same person, for example, decided to drive him to Kigali, the person he was working with and he had trusted, and the government was working with that person he trusted, how does government become culpable for that operation?
It's the rainy season in Rwanda. We could hear the storm approaching above us. And when the clouds finally broke, it was time to pause, to reflect. And after nearly an hour of waiting, we resumed the conversation.
The international community fears that, if I have permission to speak bluntly, that, Kagame wants him convicted, rubber stamp court, lock him up and throw away the key. What guarantees can you give today of a fair trial?
All those concerns can't be further from the truth. One, Rusesabagina, a citizen of this country, was done something terribly wrong, committed a crime. I have heard that he holds other citizenships of other countries. That's okay. I have no quarrel with that. He certainly did something wrong. And by the way, he is accused with a number of other people. So he's not alone in this case that he's being tried for. So that is also clarity that must be put forward. So taking him out of that and treating him differently and special, that's not going to work. So the case is going to court, all these people being tried. And it is important that there is a fair trial.
Paul Kagame has been president of Rwanda since the year 2000. The country's constitution has already been amended to allow him to serve more terms. Human Rights Watch claims that opposition figures are persistently targeted. If Kagame wins the next election in 2024, he could hold on to power for more than a decade longer.
There's no Western leader that has been in office as long as you have.
Do I care about that?
Because
the Western leader is a Western leader.
Because electorates normally throw people out. The nature of electorates.